The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk, the Bronx's flagship television talk show. Our phones are not open tonight because of the nature of our program, but you can email comments to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Well, as we all know, the Bronx is known as the borough of universities, and it's also known as the borough of parks. But after tonight's show, maybe some of us would think that the Bronx is known as the borough of books. We have 4 Bronx authors tonight who have written excellent books, and we're going to give you a chance to meet them and learn about their work. 2 notes before we get started. There are many other Bronx books out there, and they're all deserving of joining us tonight. We didn't have room for anybody, so we did the best that we could. The other thing I wanted to mention, that after reading each one of the books, I can tell you that each one of the authors deserves the full half hour, but we just don't have the time for all of that. So again, we're doing the best we can, and so that's how we get started tonight. Our first book is on the Times bestseller list. Liz Murray is the author of Breaking Night. Good evening, Liz. Thanks for joining us.
Gary, thanks for having me.
This really is an incredible story. It's known as the story of Homeless to Harvard. At what point in your life, when you were growing up through some very difficult circumstances, did you say, gee whiz, maybe this has been incredible, it should be a book?
You know, it took a while for me to get there. I had to live the experience first before I even knew that I had anything worth sharing. It really started from very humble beginnings. Growing up on University Avenue, right by Fordham Road, both my parents were addicted to drugs. They had lived this kind of 70s heyday, you know, the party scene in the 70s in New York, the disco dancing.
I've heard about it, yeah.
You heard about it? Yeah, you might have been at some of those parties. And, so my parents were living that high life. And then my sister Lisa and I, we grew up in the aftermath of what happened when the party was over. And they had drug addiction. And that drug addiction eventually took both of their lives.
There are many things that make the book so compelling. Among them, when you just start, there's a wonderful humanity that comes from you in the book as you tell the story. Many people would say, oh, goodness, somebody who grew up in that very difficult circumstance would be angry or would have a chip on their shoulder. You never seem to get that. What do you owe that to? Why did that happen that way, that you maintained kind of a girl's outlook?
I don't know if I'd call it a girl's outlook. I would say maybe the compassion, if you could identify it as that. It was pretty simple for me because I was very deeply loved by my parents. For anyone watching who has a household where people are drug addicted, including alcohol, it's a disease. And I got pretty early on that my parents were sick, and they taught me that people can't give you what they don't have. And I just knew instinctually Mom and Dad loved me so much, but they were sick. And what I got from that was, okay, maybe I don't blame anybody. I'm not angry at my parents. What I did get, I have to figure out some things in my life on my own. And that's when I shifted into taking really 100% responsibility for my life.
Some of the things, and you know, they're so heart-wrenching to read about, and congratulations, they're told so vividly and with such passion. Was there a point in there along the way in your life, and I guess it's equivalent to saying in the book, where you said, you know what, this is just not going to work in some form? Or did you always inside you have this notion that, you know what, something great is going to happen to me or for me?
If one thing that I learned from my experiences is, I came up in the Bronx, and then eventually when my parents, their drug addiction caught up with them and they became HIV positive, and I'm like 15 years old, sleeping at my friends' houses, I went to Kennedy High School at first and dropped out. I just realized that life could change overnight. If I could have my family and a home one night and that could be gone the next, then it was like having my slate wiped clean, and I said, well, if life can change for the bad, then life can change, period. Maybe I can change my life.
We should probably fill in the blanks for folks who didn't read the book. And by the way, it's called Breaking Night, and let's make sure that people know it's available literally everywhere where books are sold. Right?
And I think people being from the Bronx know what the title is, but just in case, Breaking Night, we say in the Bronx, staying up all night until the sun rises. And I could think of no more appropriate title than moving from darkness to light and capturing my story of homeless to Harvard. So Breaking Night.
That's the point I wanted to get to. And you were homeless, and you, as we've already established, grew up to parents in some very difficult circumstances. Why don't you tell folks how you got to Harvard and how that transition actually happened? It's a wonderful story. Makes for a great book, by the way.
Well, thank you. I always kept my journal with me, by the way, so this is in many ways pages from my journal made into a book. And the moment when I decided to really pick myself up, my mother had died. And when she died of AIDS and I was 16 years old and homeless, I really understood that she had been homeless in the Bronx when she was a teenager, and I could see at that moment that my life had a symmetry with her life, that I was in fact recreating her life, and that I had to break the cycle and where I'd come from. So in that feeling, I went back to school. I found some great teachers. I found organizations downtown that give resources to homeless students, and I in fact attended high school while I was homeless, and inch by inch, choice by choice, day by day, I did my work.
In the way that you tell it, you make it sound so simple. She's being very modest. This is an inner strength that comes from this person, that emerges from this book, that you really deserve a lot of credit. And let's tell the story of how you got to Harvard. And
sure.
why you ended up. It's a wonderful, wonderful Bronx tale.
Things can be simple and still difficult, and it was. You're right. It's challenging. I applied to this alternative high school. I got in. I met some amazing teachers at Humanities Prep downtown. They really took me under their wing. My community supported me in nonprofits. I applied to Harvard because my teacher took me on a field trip to go take some pictures in Boston, and we took some pictures in front of the John Harvard statue in Harvard Yard. And by standing there in Harvard Yard and having all my belongings in my backpack, and in fact being homeless at the time, it occurred to me, I thought, oh, these students are so wonderful, they're Harvard students. And I went, oh, wait a second, I qualify. And so with my teacher's encouragement, I applied.
This is what I think is so inspirational, and I hope it would be inspirational to people in the Bronx who may be in difficult circumstances. And that's what I was referring to earlier. Something in you kept you going, or kept you believing, I could be at Harvard, I could do this. And so congratulations for having achieved that.
Well, and anyone listening that's in hard times, one thing that I learned in life, the world is filled with people who will tell you what you can and cannot do. And if there's anything that served me really well in this life is to not listen to that and go, you know what? You don't really know until you do it. No one knows what you can do until you make the attempt. Get up off your couch and do it. So I've never taken no for an answer, and I think that's really helped shape my life.
Was writing the book ultimately therapeutic? One would think that with all that you had to tell, and if we had more time with you, we were going to get to other authors, we could go through a lot of it. It must have been therapeutic for you.
It was huge. I mean, in many ways, if you sit down to write a memoir about your life, you're inevitably going to have to write about your parents and where they came from. And when you do, it really shows you how your life is the result of generations before you. Mm-hmm. And it felt in many ways like a letter to my parents, who I love very, very much.
You are doing some great work now, and there are a number of organizations that you're part of. Tell me a little bit about what you want people to know, and what organizations they can use to help them out.
Sure. If you're on hard times and you're a youth in New York City, there's an organization you should know about called The Door. And their website is simply door.org, door.org. And they're a haven for homeless teenagers. Pantry packs filled with food, counseling, they'll help you get to college. I'm working with them now, and we're building a high school for homeless teenagers that opens in September 2011. It'll be called Broome Street Academy. So if you're underage, you've got some stuff going on, you're looking for resources, door.org, 555 Broome Street, door.org, and homeless teens can find an abundance of resources there.
You know, you could recount, and again, frankly, I want to sell the book. I want people to read it, not only because we want Liz to do well, because she deserves it, but because it's a wonderful book and has wonderful lessons. But as people get through it, they will be able to realize that you can have an outlook even after having been through some very difficult circumstances.
And when you achieve a success in your life, I had a very wise person tell me that it's not success unless it creates opportunities for other people. So that's why I'm building this high school, and I encourage anyone who's ever had anything work in their life to make sure you bring other people with you.
How do people contact you or get through? There's a website.
Yeah, if you want to contact, liz.murray@yahoo.com is my email. liz.murray@yahoo.
And also, I think there's a website. Liz Murray, congratulations on literally everything. The book, the fact that you turned everything around, and all the success and wonderful things you're doing for other people in the future.
Thank you for having me here, Gary.
Great. Okay, there you can see the website. So we go to author number 2, and let's ask Fernando Peguero to step forward, and we'll say good evening, Peguero. That's, by the way, on the screen there is Liz's website. This is the book. Fernando, you can hold it. Stop Being Poor. There's something relevant to the discussion I just had with Liz Murray to stop being poor, isn't there?
Yes, there is. I was also sensitized by the observancy of so many poor people that come to my business. I run a business in the Bronx called the Bronx Redemption Center, and that in there a lot of people gather bottles and cans from the side of the streets, and they come to me. So day after day, I took the time to talk to them. And at one point, somebody suggested, why don't you just write a little something for us? Because each time I talk to you, it's so inspirational.
And so what? I'll hold up the book here. Stop Being Poor. So easy to say, and Liz Murray, to her credit, was able to go from one step to the other. What is the advice? What does this mean? Stop being. It's so easy to say.
Well, stop being poor means that perhaps you don't know why you're poor. That's number one. As when you get up in the morning and you have a pain in the left side of your tummy, and you say, oh my God, I have a pain. But you don't really know what it is. We who are happen to be not so poor, look at them and say, wow, why is that person doing whatever he's doing? But they themselves do not know the reasons why. And then I said, wow, the number one thing before you do anything is to identify what the problem is. So I said, what about if I tell them why they're poor? And then I began to kind of examine. And at one point I wanted to say, I'm going to write 5 or 6 points of why you may be poor. And then it got complicated. And then he said, yeah, but what if I tell them why you're poor? What does that do to them? Say, I got to tell them how to get out of it. So that's when I then decided to begin to write something about it.
Have you found people who have read the book and said, you know what? I've actually been able to turn my life around?
Well, I've done better than that. I know somebody who's been reading the book that takes 40 minutes to read.
Let's be fair. It's you know, it's not.
It's a medical prescription. Okay, it takes 40 minutes to read because it was totally designed, engineeredly designed for the very poor people. So therefore, this guy, each time he says to me, I am reading your book. He's a chronic alcoholic. So I don't know how many lines he reads every day. And then lately he's been telling me, he's been discussing this with his nephews. And then they go to school and say, they read the book all the way. But he's still reading it, and he really likes it very much, you know. But
well, the key really would be to see if he could kick the habit.
Exactly.
Give me 1 or 2, you know, ideas. Pointers for people.
Okay, the main reason that I decided that people may be poor is because tradition. They born poor, they born from parents that are poor, they live in the poor neighborhood, they dress poorly, they speak poorly.
Did I introduce you to my friend Liz Murray over here? Yeah. But that's really what the story is, and that there is a way out of it. And so what do you do?
There is a way out of it. And then what I decided to do was to each identify a problem in the book, which is about 6 of them. It's followed with a remedy. So the book is divided in 2 pieces. One is to identify why, or the why of why, and then 2, part B, is how you do that, but not in the general, but in a very specific way. How you begin to learn how not to be poor.
It starts up here?
It starts right there. And it starts with a word that is called accumulation. You have to learn how to save things. no matter what it is. It could be button for an old shirt.
Stop Being Poor, Fernando Peguero, thank you for joining us. There's a website, right? We go to the website?
You can go stopbeingpoor.net.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we move, there's stopbeingpoor.net. And also the book is available, I guess, through the website?
And through the,
Go ahead.
what is the yours is?
Through Amazon.
Amazon, yes.
Through Amazon.com. Okay, next, we're moving right down the road here. It's Bernard Blue Rowell. Good evening, Bernard. Thank you for joining us.
How you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
All right.
Son, I got your back.
Yeah, I got his back.
Give us the background about what this is all about.
Well, you know, a lot of times our kids don't talk to us about certain things that happens in school. And, you know, when they get around their friends, you know, they tend to shy up about talking to their parents. What happened was a situation was happening in school, and I would notice every time he come home there was something a little miscombobulated about him. You know, so when you start to see a change in your child's pattern and behavior, it's like, okay, you question that. My kids always seem to wonder, Dad, why you know? How you know this?
I know because I read the book and I know what you did. I don't want to give it away because I want people to read it because it's a fascinating story. It's not totally true, but in terms of what you wanted to do for the young man,
Right.
that was the idea, is that he should know that he has somebody behind him.
Exactly. You should always talk to your parents because I'm going to tell you, certain situations you be in, okay, when you step up, like I was in a situation with my son, and he was glad that I was like, later on he said, Dad, I'm so glad you was here. Mm-hmm. So it's like, listen, you need to talk to me more. And I kind of, you know, put some things in there that make it very enjoyable for kids can say, okay, you know something, I'll be able to talk to my parents. The way if he put it that way, okay, you got it.
And I have to tell you, the language that you used was very interesting. I mean, so at first I said, wait a minute, everybody really talks like that, but nobody writes like that.
Exactly.
But the fact is, it is in the vernacular of how people talk in the Bronx.
Exactly. See, because my parents, they come from the South. Okay, my mother from Adel, Georgia, my father was from Alabama. So the way we grew up knowing, it's pretty much in the same family of Bernie Mac. You know, they was hardcore. They tell it like it is. You know, so there's a lot of ways people write today. You know, and I wanted to bring the true way.
You didn't want to talk down over people or down to people. You wanted, especially people in the Bronx, to be able to talk in their language.
Exactly. Feel comfortable when you read this.
Just
like,
to
well,
go
my
back
parents
now,
is from this.
In the book, you are a single parent, a father, which is relatively unique. A father who is a single parent. Frankly, is that true?
That was true.
That was true.
That was true.
You raised the children, and when they read the book, what did they say?
They laughed because the thing is, it's like, how you know this? Because I watch you, I raise you, I know everything about you. It's nothing you can do that I can't know that you're doing. You know,
there is a real sincerity about being a parent that comes through. It seems to me from reading it, the bottom line is two-way. Talk to your children and get them to talk to you.
Exactly. Because see, what happens is, if you don't know, ask. Maybe we can give you the solution to that. You know? And I tell a story about an experience that I endured to my son. So he's like, wow, yes. And it was kind of funny, too.
Son, I Got Your Back. How do people get the book, and how can they contact you? Or
you can contact me on my email at bernardrowell@yahoo.com. You can pick the book up at amazon.com, barnesandnobles.com, and humanbooks.com.
Great. Bernard Rowell, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And let's bring in our Ducky Boys. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to present, here they are, the Lost Boys of the Bronx, the oral history of the Ducky Boys. James Hannon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And Kevin Byrne, an actual Ducky Boy. Thanks.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thank you. James, this is a fascinating read for me growing up, not too far from the Bedford Park area where you grew up. What is it about the Ducky Boys that was worth telling?
Well, I originally got into it because of the whole Wanderers movie. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. The Ducky Boys are so cool, and they can kick your butt and whatever. But then as I got more and more into it, I met people like Kevin and Jerry Gertler, who they told me the stories of the Ducky Boys who, I mean, they're a lost generation. I mean, there's only like, there was hundreds of them, but there's only like 25% left.
I had the sense from going through the book that on one hand, this was a gang, and there was this, and I'm going to get to him about this in a second. But they were tough, and they wanted, and, you know, and there were fights, and but there was also a sense, you know what? This wasn't as much as like a terribly violent, you know, end of the earth gang like the Bloods or the Crips or things they have now. There was a certain sense of family, of community, of kind of just kids hanging out. And there's a question that you keep asking through the book: how tough really were they? You know, so what's really the bottom line of what the Ducky Boys really was?
They were tough, no doubt. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in a dark alley with Kevin here.
This is this close as I'm going to get.
But they were real. I mean, they were more of a prankster gang. Like they would cause a whole bunch of pranks. There's a whole chapter in here devoted to pranks. They would knock off the Metro North. They would. Oh, there was a million things that they would do.
Mm-hmm. Kevin, why the Ducky Boys? What was worthwhile about this? Why did you join? Why did you stay with it? Why did it mean something to you?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say it's good to be here, and it's good to be anywhere, because a lot of the guys that were in this book, they're just not around anymore. Mm-hmm. And my brothers were original members, and they're not around anymore. But I started hanging out down there because of them, and.
Mm-hmm. There was, and it comes right through in the book, and I certainly would recommend it. There's something that comes through there very well that not only, and there were difficult things, and you say many of them were not around, something nice about it, something good about it. There was a real camaraderie. Tell me what that was about.
Well, it was like one big family. There was a camaraderie with everybody that hung around down there. It was like one big family. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the kids came from troubled homes, and
so this became their family.
Yeah,
I mean, this is really what we know the story about gangs is even right now. You know, we were talking just before the show about the life of the Ducky Boys. It was 63 to 70. I read, so I know the answer. Why didn't it last? And it's a very interesting story, and you can learn something about the Bronx out of this.
Well, during that time was a very tough time. I mean, there was drugs there was glue, I mean, it kind of got watered down as people would go off to war, people would get older. Mm-hmm. They basically went off and did their own things, and they got into harder drugs, they got into crime and things like that.
I realized that people got older. What I really wanted to allude to was the idea that drugs really played a point, because you make a strong point about sniffing glue, which really destroyed people's lives.
Right. It was horrible. I mean, Kevin has seen these people firsthand, but glue would just rot away the brain cells, right. And it was worse than like alcohol. It was worse than marijuana.
What was the difficulty in chronicling this? Because among the things that emerges through the book is, you know, I couldn't quite get an answer for that, or he said this, he said we had the fight, but then she said maybe we didn't have the fight. What's the difficulty here?
The obvious thing is it's 40 years, it's almost 50 years now. There were so many of them, and they had different experiences down in the park. And where they hung out.
Which park was that?
Bronx Park, which is right next to Botanical Gardens.
Right.
Over on Webster 204th is the place called the Balcony, and that was kind of one of their centers.
I guess it was like any chronicler that you want to tell a story about something that you can't just go to a library and look up.
Right.
There's another thing that emerges towards the end, and that's this idea of Ace Frehley from Kiss. What's the deal? He was a Ducky Boy? He was not a Ducky Boy? Come on.
Okay.
Out with the truth.
All right. Ace Frehley thinks he's a Ducky Boy.
Should I ask Kevin?
You could.
Well, go ahead. You finish up, and then we'll go with it.
When I was asking about, when I first met Ace Frehley, when I first talked to him on the phone, and I was trying to get him, this is originally a video project, I was trying to get him to be a part of the documentary, and I was like, oh, could you go on camera? He says, well, he'd charge me. So then I was like, okay, well, and then I started asking the Ducky people about, was he really a Ducky Boy? And they were like, really, he was a Ducky Boy? It's like, yeah, he hung out with Bobby McAdams, who was a real Ducky Boy, but not.
So it wasn't that important to get him in there,
right?
Even though it was acknowledged that because of his fame, etc.
Right. I get emails every few days saying Ace Frehley was a Ducky Boy. I know, I can't do anything about it.
What I wanted to capture from you, and I'll ask Kevin to back that up. there's a passion that you have for this era and for the Ducky Boys that comes through. And listen, I think you're old enough to know that fighting is not a good thing and violence is not a good thing. What is that magic that made this so worth telling?
Well, there was a lot of magic, but the magic that did it for me was that in researching it, I met the people, and they're real people. They're good people. You know, I'm sure not all of them are good, but Kevin here is a great person. I mean, I didn't know him, but I lived 200 feet away from him growing up. He's 17 years older than me, but I did not know him, and we lived 200 feet away from each other until 1903.
And so this connection put you together. Kevin, give me one story, one thing that if somebody says, tell me about the Ducky Boys, what would you say? Got 30 seconds. What do you got?
It was
a good one,
it was just no. I mean, it was a certain time in the Bronx where a group of people came together, and it's anybody that remembers that time and era. It was just a really simpler time, and towards the end, when the drugs and everything else came, things got really bad. So it was kind of an innocent time with a bunch of kids hanging out down in the park, and it was really a great time. Yeah.
The Lost Boys of the Bronx, the oral history of the Ducky Boys gang. James, available everywhere, right?
Available everywhere. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, mostly the website.
Okay, I want to thank all of our authors for joining us. Let's get everybody together as we just wrap up the show. Everybody's holding their book up. We have Breaking Night, Stop Being Poor, Son, I Got Your Back. Could we get them on camera here? We want to make sure to get everybody. There we go. Breaking Night, Stop Being Poor, Son, I Got Your Back, and The Lost Boys of the Bronx, the oral history of the Ducky Boys. It is the borough of books, right? We now have added one definition to our borough of the Bronx. Folks, if you have further comments or questions on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@hotmail.com. And we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of our show always available at blip.tv. Just search for Bronx Talk. Now, next week, we'll talk about the prospects for the Mary Mitchell Community Center, which is slated for closing by the city. It's something you're going to want to know a lot more about. Then on the 18th, we'll celebrate the 16th anniversary of Bronx Talk with Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. We won't be taking phone calls that night, so if you do want to ask the Borough President something, send me an email at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll try and include it in our program. Bronx Talk, Monday nights at 9 here on Cablevision's Channel 67, Verizon Fios 33. Special thanks to Director Mike Arias, of course, Jane Filoro for keeping us all together, the cast of thousands up in the booth, and to all the books in the Bronx. And keep reading about our wonderful borough because there's great things going on in it, and you should know as much about it as you can.
According to estimates, over 1 billion people live in appalling levels of poverty. Denied even basic standards of food, water. Nearly half of the world's population earns less than
Send help.
Tell me what happened?
I think he's dead. Please, he was shot.
Okay, what's going on right now?
I think he needs help. Send help.